Appreciate it. This is Chris Cooper. I'm a Senior Area Vice President of Sales for Healthcare and Life Sciences at Collibra. I've had the opportunity to spend a good chunk of my career helping healthcare organizations understand data and make better decisions using the breadth of data that we engage with. I'm really excited to share our content with you and discuss some of what we are seeing in the market today. To help me, I've got Sarah Rasmussen, Collibra practice lead and engagement partner from First San Francisco Partners, one of Collibra's premier implementation and services partners that we work with across the country and around the world. So very excited to have Sarah with us today, and really excited to share some thoughts and ideas that we are seeing with a breadth of organizations as they start to leverage Collibra to drive value and manage risk across common data migration initiatives, both application migrations as well as cloud migration initiatives. So just to give a little bit of context before I pass it over to Sarah, one of the things that we're seeing across healthcare IT, and certainly this expands beyond healthcare for those of you that don't necessarily spend all of your time in healthcare, is that we're seeing a real challenge in the change that has become a constant across the industry. We see that, most health systems in the US have well more than 75 mission critical applications and IT systems that they are managing and maintaining. If you think a typical life cycle of a key system is somewhere between 3 to 6 years, you can imagine that virtually every organization is undergoing some significant change or migration, if not multiple migrations, upgrades over time. And that really drives the challenges that we see around being able to understand data effectively. We see that implementation is incredibly time intensive. With each new application that an organization looks to be implemented, um, we are seeing a broad set of engagement and a large number of users being impacted as we deploy these new systems and solutions across the ecosystem. We're also seeing a broad number of users who are really trying to make the most out of the cloud-based environments that are out there. And what we see is that these implementation efforts, let alone the data migration to support them, can often take years. Migration costs are certainly can be well more than 50% of the acquisition cost of any net new system. 73% of data migrations take longer than expected, and 54% exceed their initial budgets. It's kind of in the context of these frameworks that we're seeing our customers struggle with data migration and the ongoing technology change that's really required to drive new use and engagement of key technology systems across the healthcare ecosystem. Sarah, I know that you've had the opportunity to work with a number of large organizations across the country as they've really struggled with adoption, deployment, migration of key clinical and critical operational systems across the health system. What are you seeing?
First of all, thank you so much for having me here. It's just a pleasure to work with Collibra. I'm going on 3 years now in my current role, and have really enjoyed all of the partnership that we see. So I will answer your question in a moment, Chris. I want to set the stage in thinking about engagement. So just looking back at this year doesn't, these images on the screen are so common to us as we sit in our remote locations and work together with people. And so in thinking about those large implementations, engagement is really key. And so setting the stage for what we're talking about today is these in healthcare, we have electronic management record migration. We are seeing many ERP migrations coming through. These are intensive programs. They're very robust applications with tons of functionality. They require a lot of time, a lot of knowledge, and a lot of engagement. So that's what we're talking about here today. And I'd like the audience and attendees to think about all of the meetings that we attend on a day-to-day basis, and how many of those meetings do you come out of thinking, you know, we just solved a lot. We brought forward, you know, some key issues, and we came out of it with the needed results. So with migration efforts, it requires a lot of discussion, a lot of back and forth, and extensive amount of detail being captured. So we're going to go through some of that today, and really what we're seeing out in the market is there's either companies that are, you know, really struggling as technologies changed quickly, and they're identifying the need for data governance, the need for data literacy, and improving maturity in various data capabilities. And, you know, one thing, you know, the screen in the middle is a Collibra screenshot of a traceability diagram. And so talking about engagement, I've seen firsthand the value of having a centralized application and repository to hold a lot of this information. So we're going to talk about that today. All right. And so yeah, for San Francisco partners, our passion is data governance, and, you know, getting people and process in place and enabling the usage of data. So today, in order for us to help and talk about what we do with other companies, we're going to go over the need for maturity and data governance and data management capabilities to support these major initiatives. We're going to talk about how Collibra Data Intelligence Cloud and data quality and observability play a role in that. And then, you know, there's no better time than using these initiatives to increase data literacy, data centricity, and engage people across the organization. Next. And yeah, we can go into, so this is, you know, just a sample model of a data governance operating model. You know, in thinking about these initiatives, a lot of times they're very, you know, driven by IT in many ways. These companies that an ERP or technology organization has tons of functionality. They're built to meet the needs of their customers. So the majority of the functionality built within it is meeting those needs, going through the RFP process and selecting your vendor. It's an extensive process, and it requires a lot of building out the use case, understanding your pain points. As Chris said, there's a lot of companies that are changing their technology stack pretty frequently. So knowing and understanding that this is a major investment of time and money and resources, it's really good to just kind of pause and think about, how do you implement? A lot of times we see companies start to implement, you know, in leveraging out of the box functionality, or doing like for like, and thinking, you know, we're just going to take all of that functionality, turn the switch, and it's going to meet our needs. A lot of times that is where IT comes into play, and a lot of times it's consulting companies that are supporting organizations through this migration. there's a lot of information that is gathered. There's a lot of information that is known and inherent in the business and meeting the business needs. So it's really important to get the right people to the table at the right time for these discussions. And um, so, leveraging a data governance operating model is starting to look at the different departments, the different business areas, the different data domains. So with an ERP migration, it's finance, HR, supply chain. With EMR, it's your patient record, and patient information is leveraged across healthcare industries, across all of the major different departments, and then downstream for analytics and research. So it's really key to have the right organizational structure and people that know and understand the data. So as part of a kickoff of these projects, it's very, very common to gather business requirements and functional requirements and technical requirements. And a lot of times we don't see data requirements called out, but there's tons of data requirements as part of this. So in thinking about that, do you have the right people at the table? Do you have the right decision makers? Do you have the right decisioning structure in place? And that's where a data governance operating model really comes into play. And then you think about the investment and the risk of not doing this in the right manner. And so thinking about business continuity management, and that's where we see an operating model, very follow along the lines of business continuity and long-term sustainability of these efforts. And so, with business continuity, you have your business units, you have your business functions that within those business units, and you have your business processes, and then you have all of the data that supports those processes. And it's just really key to understand, that information up front, and what's the need that you're needing to make with these migration efforts, and think about all the valuable interaction that can take place. Next. So we talked a lot about data governance, and so I want to dive in a little bit more on metadata, data quality management, and master data management. So I was talking about those data, or those requirements, business, functional, technical, and data requirements. Though that really translates well into metadata. I would say that 80% of what is captured can be translated and captured within tools such as Collibra. And so it's really an opportunity to not only engage through a data governance operating model and getting people to the table, but also to capture that information and not lose it either in SharePoint or, as people leave an organization. A data governance operating model is there it's a framework, it's a structure, it's not, it's naming people in these roles, but as people move on or change or go to different departments, you have that framework in place to sustain and maintain outcomes. So that's really about reducing risk. Data quality management, I talked a little bit about the technologies. It's pretty amazing what these technologies provide an organization. It looks amazing in the demos, right? So, but I've been through this myself, and I've worked with a lot of organizations. The data actually changes as you implement a new ERP or EMR. So, and this goes for a CRM or a broader master data management hub. as new technology comes into play, the data is going to change. Those calculations that were done in the old ERP are going to have a new, possibly a new calculation. The data flowing through is going to look a little bit different. So thinking about data quality management and looking and profiling the old data versus the new starts to tell you, do you need to put in some stopgaps for handling that change, or is it more about communication and expectation of the outcome? So data quality plays a huge role in this. Master data management, what we're talking about in an ERP is mastering of financial data, is mastering of HR data. It's typically the source of truth in an organization. So it's really good to think about not necessarily an MDM hub where you're doing the consolidation, match, merge, and pub sub model of master data. These technologies really play the role to master and make sure that the quality at the source is there. So really think about that as a risk factor in not getting it right. So putting those concepts into place, understanding the definition, and having clarity across the organization is really key. And data architecture, engineering, access management. This is a great time to up the understanding and data literacy and good data design practices. So as you're, working through this, lean into these migration efforts to put in place some standards around data development, data implementation, and that goes such a long way, especially as you're doing, auto ingestion into Collibra for physical data dictionaries or lineage. That is the point where good data design and practices really helps to bolster, the understanding of the data as well as the long-term maintainability.
Absolutely, Sarah. I mean, think of all the decisions that have to be made in any implementation of any key system. Just being able to capture that, have the right decision framework is incredibly important. The ability to understand what are those decisions that have been made and how does that impact ultimately the quality of the data and the long-term support and viability of that solution is critical. It's surprising how those data decisions made early in a process ultimately will have an impact on what you can bring out and what you can report on later from an operational perspective.
Absolutely. All right. And if you go on to the next slide, I just want to, this is kind of, we've jumped into a lot of the complexity. I really just want to set the tone for, metadata management and what can be captured in Collibra and how these questions can be answered and, with good understanding of metadata management, capture, and having some of those solutions underway as you're developing out the broader integration into the new tool and migration from the old. So, it's really important to understand what data do you have now? What is the legacy data? What is that data used for? What is that going to look like in the new world? And how am I going to retire that information and leverage the new solution? So if you're not paying close attention to that in these migrations, it's going to be really hard to sunset the old way. There's, a lot of access points. We see, thousands of integration points a lot of times in these legacy applications, and downstream reporting really depend on it. So not understanding, what data do you have? Where is it stored? What's the meaning? So thinking about reference data and code sets and making sure that as you translate and leverage potentially new code sets, that the meaning of how you've run your business in the past is still consistent in where you're going forward. So this is just a, setting the tone of how important it is to capture so much of this information as you move through the migration.
Absolutely. And I think one of the really powerful values of a platform like Collibra for structured metadata management is you go beyond just documentation of the decision process that was made. You really open the door to leverage metadata as an asset for the organization going forward. And we see a lot of this as organizations then start to build up really an interactive catalog of metadata across the organization. And that can be about the data itself, the systems, the decisions made around that. It can be around the analytics products that are created to support the ongoing operations and decision process of the data captured by each of these key applications. But that certainly is where you go beyond just, gosh, we've documented a set of decisions. We know what the appropriate reference values are. By working with Collibra, a solution like Collibra, where you have an interactive platform to manage that metadata and the relations between that, you can really start to connect the dots. So you can understand how data is being used, how it flows through the environment, what transformations occurred to that data, and what that impact of changes to the underlying source will have on analytic products that your organization is creating. So being able to find the appropriate data across the organization is really accelerated once you have an interactive metadata management platform that ultimately supports deployment of key technologies like a data catalog or a report catalog that really starts to make the process much more interactive. So you're not just documenting an implementation for the sake of documenting an implementation. You're really creating a knowledge base that ultimately drives that higher level of data literacy and understanding. And certainly leveraging a platform like Collibra, where you've got the ability to not only automatically harvest metadata from data sources and ETL tools and BI tools as it moves through your environment, but you're also able to enrich that with really a broad range of additional context and content that's really important to understand what that data means. So the ability to capture a really rich, robust business glossary, whether it's something that you have in-house, that your vendor provides, that you need to augment based on your specific implementation, being able to bring together the business metadata, the technical metadata, the operational metadata, so that you have a way to review, interact, and work with information is incredibly important. So being able to find that content is critical. And then it really allows you to drive actionable results, such as being able to shop for data across the organization as just one activity. Certainly leveraging workflow capabilities in the Collibra platform, you're able to not only capture that metadata, but you're able to operationalize your business processes and approval processes to ensure that business buy-in is appropriate. You've got the right stakeholder buy-in to key definitions, and you've got the transparency the organization needs around that decision process. One of the big things that we see from a context perspective that is incredibly important that organizations have struggled with for years is this notion of data flow. Sometimes we call it lineage, data provenance. It has a lot of different concepts, but if we look at, data is rarely a static asset within the organization. It's often captured for one concept and then used many times. And we certainly see this really across healthcare significantly, where we're capturing clinical data to drive the care delivery process to make the best decisions for an individual patient. And then we use that data for lots of secondary purposes to improve outcomes across the patients, to do longitudinal studies, to improve our clinical care, and the efficiency of our care delivery process. Obviously, that data is used to support the financial process as well. So understanding how information captured in one part of the organization flows and moves between systems and the technologies that we've been discussing is incredibly powerful for the organization to be able to understand where we are able to have impact. And obviously, as you have changes in your key transactional systems, your EMRs, your EHRs, your ERP systems, that change in the underlying data, even though the concepts may be the same, ultimately has impact on the analytics products that your organization has created and the decision processes that exist. So, broad set of capabilities that we can start to draw out as you understand the flow of information, both technically and from a business process perspective throughout the organization. Just a few of the things that we see as critical context that organizations need. And certainly, what we're looking at here is a business flow of how information flows from source systems through a number of data repositories to an analytic asset. But we've also got the ability to really understand that detailed technical lineage of how data flows through the environment by looking at your existing ETL tools, your SQL code, your code that's moving data from uh, uh, one system to another across your environment, whether those are on-premise or cloud-based systems, being able to connect to those environments, interrogate the code that's being used to move that data, and ultimately come up with not only a visual representation, but also an important set of relationships that can then be tied in on how we connect the dots across the organization and throughout the change of data in the enterprise.
And Chris, you mentioned before, if you go back to that prior slide, if you mentioned before that companies are not, it's okay if you don't, but companies are not only implementing, a new ERP solution, but they're also doing cloud migration. So this is that traceability, the technical lineage that helps you to understand from the source down to your advanced analytic new capabilities in your migration to the cloud and that sort of thing. It's really amazing to know and understand that information from the source and then be able to leverage that downstream.
Absolutely, Sarah. I mean, this is becoming more and more important because as we well know, data doesn't just stay in our data center anymore. The walls have become very permeable in our enterprise, and so understanding, how data flows from a SaaS hosted EHR application into a third-party cloud repository for analysis that's used by an internal analytics BI reporting tool in and alone of itself is incredibly complex, let alone being able to understand all of the transformations and changes that may have occurred as data made its journey from point of capture, origination, to all of the many secondary uses of data that we're seeing across the healthcare ecosystem.
Yeah, so let's spend a little time of talking about data quality and I want to bring back that engagement concept, really the people in the process and those roles that uh, are doing the work of data for these migration efforts. And so if you're looking at data quality and implementing trusted results, you need to have the people within those different business units and functional areas that know and understand what do they do on a day-to-day basis, what data do they use, and so leveraging the business and implementing stewardship at the business level is really critical. And an example is KPIs, understanding your key performance indicators, as well as compliance on a patient record. So that's really that business facing view that comes in and says, these are our business rules to make this so. And then, it's really valuable to have those data quality analysts that know and understand how to take those business rules, very much understand the data, and then come up with the means to capture this information in the correct way, and handing that off to IT in order to not only implement that data quality rule through SQL or code, but also put those controls in place to make sure that it's being monitored. So if bad data comes through, or if a change happens upstream, it's caught as soon as possible to not, change the outcome. So this is just showing you the different roles within data governance and data management, and how they interact together, especially thinking about how many decisions and business rules need to be in place in order to meet your end result. Next. And so this is our methodology. This is, and I think at the end of this, there will be a way. So there's a white paper that I got to participate with in writing with Collibra to work through setting up a data quality function within your organization. So this is FSFP's methodology that we help work with other organizations to implement. And, just thinking about data profiling, what did it look like before in the legacy system? What does it look like now? Comparing those results and getting those people that really know and understand the impact of those potential changes to the table. So, I see these migration efforts start, as 80-90% IT driven. We're going to take the functionality, we're going to, bring it forward, populate the data, run the reports, and then bring it back and just verify that it meets the need. Typically, that's when people start to say, this is just not what we had expected. This is not the outcome. The risk is being raised. There's frustration. And so, implementing data governance and data management capabilities upfront pays huge dividends. Understanding, doing the data profiling is key. Assessing those results, getting, business and IT together to look at that information and verify, in a proactive manner, this is what we're seeing. This is how, we're going to accept potential changes in the data and the outcomes, or we're going to need to come up with a workaround, a different solution for that. Cleansing and standardization is just putting in those controls and those data quality rules that promote that expectation. The monitoring is just, the controls are in place and issues are being identified and brought forward. So Collibra has great interfaces to monitor for data quality, see changes that are happening, and also bring it back to the accountable steward, the accountable business area, to see that. And working through issue remediation up front. So a lot of these implementations have a pretty extensive go live where you have to address some issues. So the longer that go live, the eyes on that are, the harder it is to overcome some of the issues. So bringing data quality to the forefront from the beginning as you're working through testing and verification and preparing for that go live is really key. And so, I mentioned the user interfaces. You have both Data Intelligence Cloud as well as data quality and observability, that you can use the dashboards, you can use workflows, you can see what's happening at an enterprise level. All right. And this is pretty self-explanatory. I just want this is talking about upping that data literacy and thinking about if each of these traits are thought about as data requirements and business requirements and functional requirements come into play, it's really powerful to think about, what is it that these different data quality dimensions can do to reduce that risk and just bring forward the trust and the outcome and maintainability long term.
Absolutely, Sarah. And I think one of the things that Collibra has recently done is we've added Collibra data quality and observability to our solution stack. And we really look to approach, kind of the breadth of needs from a data quality perspective. So that really starts with being able to observe your data as it exists, where it exists today. So that's helping your data engineers, your data architects, your system owners understand the data as it occurs, as it's created, and as it flows through the environment to determine are we within our normal parameters and ranges? We all know that our data changes. Typically, most organizations are going to see a different patient volume on Saturday and Sunday than they are on, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Fridays may even be their own unique outlier in some organizations. So being able to look across your data historically, understand, is it within the normal trends and parameters that we see, or do we have an outlier that needs some additional attention, either from a behavioral perspective or how data may be captured is incredibly important. And certainly data quality is nothing new. People have been writing rules in SQL and other technologies to catch errors in data for longer than I care to think about anymore. But the challenge is that as the breadth of our data and the speed and the frequency of change has occurred, it's become almost impossible to really understand and manage the breadth of rules that are needed to determine if you've got some variation. A typical organization may have, 100, 200, 300,000 columns of data that are critical to their ongoing operations. Certainly, no one can look at those on a regular basis and determine, do we have some drift? Do we have some change that's occurred? Do we have outliers that need attention? So leveraging really advanced AI and machine learning capabilities, we're able to highlight those and provide those signals that you may need to dig into. Plus, we provide the very rich, complex custom rule development as well. So the ability to go in and create those rules that are unique to your business, tie those back to the policies, and provide that transparency to all of your users via the data catalog is certainly Collibra's direction and how we approach this to help organizations take data quality from a back office operation to something that becomes part of the data literacy so that the organization understands how the data has changed over time, where there are potential areas of concerns, and then certainly support a workflow process to make sure that the appropriate mitigation and controls are put in place. So certainly we could spend more than an hour, I'm sure, just talking about data quality and approaches to addressing that. But it's really about using the right amounts of technology and innovation to identify where those issues exist within your data, bringing together what you know about the information, the ownership, the stewardship model that you've put in place for your governance program and your organizational responsibilities as it relates to data, and being able to drive a workflow process that allows you to deal with anomalies and variations in the quality of your data in a timely and effective manner. Because as we know, rarely is data quality just an IT issue. Typically, it goes back to the business process. So being able to collaborate between business users that understand the context and what data should be, the IT teams that have responsibility for control and implementation around that, and having a common view of what the changes occur within the data, potential data quality issues that may be that may arise is incredibly important to help bring the organization together and come up with a common view of data quality, which ultimately speaks to this notion of data literacy, which is personally one of my most exciting areas because, as we know, we've really changed as over the last 15, 20 years across healthcare. We didn't used to have to be data specialists to do any job within a health system. But the reality is now everyone is expected to use data to make improvements in care delivery, operational efficiency, and that requires a level of data literacy that often many folks have struggled with because simply they didn't grow up in today's modern data-driven world.
Yeah. Well put, Chris. So I eat, live, breathe data. It's my passion. It's why I work for the company that I do, and I love working with clients to improve their data capabilities. Data literacy comes into play as soon as you start these conversations. So there's nothing more rewarding than seeing a client and a data champion take over and be able to start to show excitement. So like with EMR, it doesn't sound exciting, but if you're starting to work with a client in the finance area, they're finally getting to streamline their reporting. They're getting answers quickly. They're able to explain the source of the information and where it came from and have consistency across their reporting. That it can get, it's great to see data champions work with others in their organization and then show other business areas the value and get them engaged. So it's definitely something that we see time and time again. It's not easy. This work is not easy, but it's a lot easier than having an implementation go live and not have the trust there. So it's a well worthwhile investment in your organization. Leadership should welcome this with open arms because like Chris said, data is data centricity is where we're going. You can barely do anything even in your personal life without understanding a lot of the information that goes into that decision-making process. So we just really like to break it apart with people and process, technology and data, and think about the different points that you can leverage and lean into for data literacy. And so this, the statistics in this just go to show the value in, being proactive in your data capabilities as you're moving into a major migration, or if you see that you're hitting some of these statistics and really struggling to make strides in the work that you're doing, it's okay to pivot. It's the time is, it's always important because the investment in data literacy and understanding goes way beyond just this implementation. It goes, it impacts that data, advanced analytics and BI capabilities and research is definitely key. So I just think that it's really exciting to see people lean in to leverage products like Collibra to get those conversations going, that engagement going across the different decisioning points that you need to make as you work through this implementation.
Absolutely. And I think it's incredibly important to, continue to think about, data literacy as an ongoing evolution for the organization. Certainly we have high levels of data literacy within many parts of the organization, but we also have some very low levels of data literacy. So being able to meet people where they are, provide a view of information that's relevant for their level of maturity from a data literacy perspective, and help them explore and investigate new areas where they can become more data literate without needing to become technology specialists is incredibly important. We're putting a lot of demands on our healthcare workforce already, especially our clinicians and our care delivery folks. But the reality is that everyone in the organization is being expected to do more with data. And we need to be able to support them so that they have a good understanding of how things are defined, what's appropriate from a completeness perspective around a data set, and being able to really understand how to speak and engage with the broad ecosystem of data users across our enterprise.
So as a wrap up, I want to ask you, Chris, where have you seen with your Collibra clients in healthcare and life sciences and beyond, where have you seen some of those big wins with engagement? And what do you see on the roadmap that's going to further that engagement and bring people to the table for those successful conversations and outcomes?
Yeah, it's a great question, Sarah. Certainly, what we have seen in a large number of our more than 100 health systems that we work with have focused on is really being able to understand their analytics process, and starting with that understanding from an engagement perspective. We've all got hundreds, if not thousands, of reports across the organization, and being able to provide the appropriate level of engagement, support the literacy of the consumers that are using that information is incredibly important. So just inventorying the existing reporting assets, whether those are vendor provided analytics and reports, or analytics products that your team has developed internally. It's really important to be able to bring that together, improve the data literacy, make sure that people understand where that data came from, how it was defined, what the intended purposes are, and what policies may apply, both from a usage as well as an access perspective around that, and really starting to drive that engagement. We're also seeing organizations, as we started the conversation, really leveraging Collibra to not only document data migrations and application migration processes, but really make sure that there is a front end and an entry point to be able to find data across the organization. I know that there was a question that came in on kind of this notion of a data basket or shopping experience. And this is incredibly important as we start to move towards this motion of data mesh, or a more self-sufficient data environment where we're asking users to be able to really become data consumers across the organization. Being able to provide the breadth of context is important. The data shopping experience can allow people to browse, find, and request access to specific sets of data, either starting from a business concept, a specific source system, or even a policy or a set of clinical measures that may be relevant for their environment. Get access to that data, go through the appropriate organizational workflow process to make sure that they have the appropriate approvals and authorization to access that information, and then making sure that that information is delivered to them in a way that they can consume and use and build on to create their new data products. This is really important as organizations start to take a more product-centric view to creation of data. Often many of those concepts around data mesh that are becoming very popular today. How do we really build up a set of trusted data sources that are well defined? We understand how they can be used, should be used, the quality of the information, the completeness of the information that exists, and really provide that context so that I, as an information user, can quickly find it, as opposed to having to pick up the phone or jump on Slack and light up my entire extended team to find the right data. Being able to bring that together so I can compare data sets and ultimately select the best data for my analysis purpose, as I start to become either a citizen data scientist or even just a data consumer within the organization. That's certainly some of the areas where we're starting to see engagement and that need for being able to uh, have a comprehensive view of where data exists. No longer do we have that notion of a single data warehouse. Certainly there are large data warehouses that exist within the organization, but as you migrate, how do you move people from that legacy on-premise Oracle data warehouse to that now new cloud deployed solution so that they can understand, gosh, I used to go here to find my data. Where do I find it today? And is it really trusted and something that I can work with to meet my needs? So a few of the things we're seeing across our healthcare customers.
Excellent. And I see a question on, how do you start your data quality journey and not boil the ocean? I think that's a really common question is how do I even start this work? So leveraging something like an ERP migration, starting with your most critical reports, your most critical metrics, your most critical data sets in order to meet business needs or support those different reports. So it's incremental. It's, start with those problem areas and use a migration such as this to get that mechanism, the muscle memory going, getting people engaged, the right people and processes in place with a data governance operating model and stewardship. That's really key, and also having a technology that is data quality and observability. One of the greatest things is it's getting the results out in a format that people can really relate to that are outside of IT and just running SQL queries and seeing the results in a spreadsheet. So I see time and time again that these are the opportunities to increase your maturity in these areas, talk about data, increase the data literacy, and improve engagement across. So.
Absolutely. And certainly as it relates to data quality, one of the things I think that Collibra has uniquely brought to market with Collibra data quality and observability is the ability to really allow the technology to profile and inspect and identify those potential hotspots and outliers within your data that need attention without the need to go in and define rules for really the basic information. By looking historically at your data, it's pretty easy to determine what columns need a null data quality check on, or where we have time sequence data that may be out of order, and creating new conflicts within that, or we've got data type mismatches within the structure, or we've got changes to the structure of data over time. Those can really start to focus your efforts from a data quality perspective because as we all well know, there are more data quality issues than probably any organization will be able to address in a reasonable time frame. So you need to be able to have some technology that helps you that points out the key areas of attention that you need, as well as be able to bring in your traditional set of data quality rules where the business has specific things that they know need to be validated and checked within the data itself.
Right. So I think we're
One last moment here. Maddie, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, yes, thank you, Sarah and Chris. This has been awesome. Before we wrap up today, we would just like to remind all folks here that Collibra has its big event November 1st through the 3rd in San Diego, Data Citizens 2022. So this event is live and in person, and we're really excited for all the networking opportunities this provides folks, as well as all the launches and data-driven stories. And of course, when we're thinking about that, we're so lucky to have first San Francisco partners here. They'll be joining us live and in person at this event to discuss with Mayo Clinic how they have leveraged Collibra as a catalyst for stewardship, data mesh, and overall data literacy. So this is the abstract here for that discussion happening live, San Diego, November 1st to the 3rd. So we hope to see you there. And that concludes today's webinar. All right. Thank you all so much for attending. We have noted all the questions that came in, and we will send them over to teams to follow up.